Hello everyone, welcome to our channel. We have a video for you today on the subject of Salafism and an upcoming release by Sheikh Dr. Yasir Qadi on the subject of Salafism. Now we've done several videos addressing points of view of Sheikh Yasir Qadi and others on subjects including governance, points around social system, viewpoints around Aqidah. To be honest with you, Sheikh Yasir doesn't really need an introduction because he is so well known in the West. He was a major proponent of Salafism in the West, maybe more towards the American side. However, he has since then got a considerable following across the pond as well. What's interesting about this video is he references his migration from originally being a strong proponent of Salafism and the Wahhabi strain of Salafism, and how he changed his mind, and he's through encountering more information, how he changed his tone. And this was also illustrated in his video with the excellent podcasters Mad Mamluks. We will put a link to that video as well. And it is a sign of growth and sincerity when a person encounters new information and they change adoptions. And the book that he's in the process of publishing, we're recording this in early June. Inshallah, it will be out soon. And we certainly encourage everyone to get a copy of it because it does sound very interesting and it does cover a lot of ground in it. And the video which we'll be referencing initially was with Dr. Shadee Elmasry, where he discusses the book and a number of subjects around it. Essentially a synopsis of the book and his discoveries and his journey. So we will be playing the video as much as possible in full, inviting our resident Sheikh, Professor Muhammad Al-Masri, to comment on that. Why we always take this opportunity to discuss with the professor is because not only does the professor know the history of Al Saud, the history of the Najdi Dawah, also he knows the fundamental points at which there are mistakes within the creed from which Abdul Wahhab branched off his understanding. And this is certainly a contentious point, and it's a subject that's getting a lot of traction at the moment. Now, it's easy to do a very superficial takedown, and it's easy to just talk about certain atrocities. However, what we try to do in this channel is to provide an Usuli point of view, to produce something which is unequivocal. And in fact, a lot of our material is already out there, so we don't necessarily delve into it every part in as much detail because you can simply reference previous videos. Okay, so I will now start with the first part. And in this, he essentially gives a synopsis of his book while he's being interviewed by Dr. Shadee. Sorry. Okay. I will now play the video, and the first minute to 6 minutes he discusses the book and gives a brief synopsis.
Salafism. Tell us what drove you to write the book and what is the crux of your argument in the book.
Jayed, so what drove me to write the book was almost a decade ago when I was still a professor at Rose College. Omid Safi, one of the academics well known in America, was visiting, and I was just complaining to him that there's just no good book on the movement that at the time I was very sympathetic with. I found most of the books that had been written, the articles were just crass stereotypes and extremely petty, pedantic. They're not really doing justice to what the movement is supposed to stand for. And so, Omid agreed with me when I explained why I was feeling that way. Then he just said to me, "Why don't you write a book? You're the ideal person, to write it." And so he put me in touch with One World, and they were very excited about it. Unfortunately, because of my busy lifestyle and schedule, it took me 8 years to finish, literally squeezing in between my travels and everything. I was supposed to take a year and a half, but I changed careers, I changed jobs, I changed location, And I even changed maslaks and madhabs, so everything changed along the way. But the book is an academic book. It's not an emotional book, so it wouldn't have changed much of the content of the book anyway. So I'm very, very, very happy and humbled at the work. It's, or I think 600 pages, 500 pages. Very quickly divided into 6 chapters. Number 1 is a standalone. It's a bird's eye view of Salafism. If you don't have time to read the whole book, just read chapter 1, and it's just basically a very brief summary. Number 2, which is I'm really proud of, I spent a lot of passion and love in that chapter 2. Not that it didn't for the other chapters, but I love chapter 2 in particular and chapter 3. Chapter 2 is an intellectual history, a genealogy of the ideas of Salafism from the time of the proto-Sunnis all the way down to Al-Albani. I stop at Al-Albani for chapter 2. So it is a history of the figures, the movements, the intellectual trends that shaped Salafism, and which Salafism views as being a direct causal linkage. And of course, I'm a bit more nuanced. It's not directly causal, but there are trends that go from the beginning of Sunnism all the way to Al-Albani that you can find that can be categorized under this rubric. Chapter 3 is Wahhabism and Salafism. So I now go into a previous iteration of Salafism, and that is and I don't like using the term Wahhabism, but I have to because that's the academic term. I don't mean it in a derogatory sense. What exactly is Wahhabism? What are the teachings of Ibn Abdul Wahhab? Are they really Taymiyyah or not? Is it a new version? So I discuss in chapter 3 the teachings and the movement and the political evolution and the theological evolution of the teachings of Ibn Abdul Wahhab from his time up until our time. Chapter 4 is Salafism and the Brotherhood, Salafism and Islamism. And so in chapter 4, I discuss a brief history, because again, these are all, what can you do? When I say brief, I mean almost 100 pages, but still, it's basically primarily the Saudi relationship and then the Egyptian relationship, because these vary from geographic region to region. The Kuwaiti relationship is different. The Jordanian relationship is different. So the Saudi and then the Egyptian relationship between the Salafi movement and the Ikhwan al-Muslimin, the Brotherhood, the two are clearly not the same, in spite of the critics claiming they are. They're very different, and right now they're at odds with one another in a hostile manner. This is chapter 4. Chapter 5 is the phenomenon of jihadi Salafism. And so I talk about Al-Qaeda, Bin Laden, ISIS, all of these jihadi Salafi movements and their relationship with the other strands of Salafism. And then chapter 6 is global Salafism in the contemporary world. I go over as many countries as I had time to, in Asia and Africa, in America, and just briefly the history of the modern, Salafi movements and the organizations, and of course, particular emphasis on England and America, because obviously, it's an English-speaking audience. And then the book ends with post-Salafism, the phenomenon that we're seeing around the world. And then there's an epilogue where, for the only time, I become very personal. I speak in the first person, 4 or 5 pages at the end, where I just open up and I say, this is who I was, this is who I am now, this is what I liked, this is what I didn't like about the movement, and then a plea for compassion, where hatred is not going to get you anywhere, even if you agree or disagree. This is the movement you have to deal with. They are believers in Allah's messenger, and even those that are outside of the faith, you cannot demonize an entire trend because of certain aspects. So it's a plea for compassion. Anyway, that's in a nutshell, inshallah, and I'm excited. The book is coming out very soon. It is available for pre-order. Allow me to get that free plug. It's available for pre-order on Amazon, and I do encourage anybody who's interested to, inshallah, buy it and benefit from it, inshallah.
Very good. And for everyone's information, it's on pre-order. We're speaking in May. So if you're listening to the recording and it's after July, then and it should be up and ready to go.
Very important caveat, mashallah. Yes, thank you.
You listed some different types of Salafism. What about the modernists, the Egyptian modernists, such as Mahmoud Shaltut, and those also claim the word?
Yes. So this is a interesting La mushahada fil istalah, as the maxim goes. There should be no criticism when it comes to terminologies once you define them. So the modern Salafi movement, aka Al-Albani Salafism, Wahhabi Salafism, those types of movements do not view Shaltut and Abdu and Afghani as really being connected to their trajectory, right? So from their perspective, these figures are not a part of the trend that they're calling Salafi. Abdu did use the term Salafi, and Rashid Ridda then was the one who popularized it. Abdu perhaps used it once, if that there's a bit of a debate. Rashid Ridda, without a doubt, used this term. However, Rashid Ridda's version of Salafism, remember this is pre-Al-Albani, right? Al-Albani got the term from him as a young teenager. Al-Albani was a teenager in Damascus reading Al-Manar, Majalat Al-Manar, and Rashid Ridda's on his version of a revivalist streak. And in order to call his reversion something else, he's the one talking about, a Salafiyya, a version of Salafism. Rashid Ridda's Salafism is primarily associated with the revival of fiqh, to go over what he viewed as the obstinate, stagnation of the madhabs and legal schools. He wants a revival in rethinking through how fiqh should be applied, and he's not really keen on certain aspects of tasawwuf. He's not anti-Sufi, but he's not like, the types of tasawwuf that is apolitical. He was very frustrated at the impact of colonization and the fact that the majority of scholars were disconnected from the impact of colonization, and he viewed that stagnation as a crime, really. And he blamed, whether correctly or incorrectly, he blamed it on their understanding of Islam and Tasawwuf. And so his Salafism was an activist, revivalist movement. What's super interesting, his version of Salafism was tapped into by many different groups of people, right? Including Al-Albani, including Hassan al-Banna. So Hassan al-Banna and Albani are two different individuals. They are not at all alike, but they're both tapping into this revivalist streak coming along. And not just him, multiple people around the globe, in Morocco and in Jazair, there's a whole bunch of people that are tapping into Rashid Ridda. And they're all, flirting with the term Salafism. For whatever reason, those other flirtations kind of sort of fizzled out, or they stopped using the term, and only Al-Albani's version eclipsed all the other versions, right? And so Al-Albani's version of Salafism became the predominant one, and the other strands didn't quite use it. So even here in America, IIIT is tapping into basically that enlightened, with respect, obviously, I'm not trying to be critical here, I'm just being factual. This entire conversation, inshallah, I hope to be factual, not critical. The great, thinkers of California, Hathoud brothers, right? May Allah bless them, and I met them, and I admire them, I respect them. It's just a different trend of Islam. They're tapping in to that enlightened version of the Abdu project, right? That is the modern manifestation of the Muhammad Abdu via Rashid Ridda, to rethink through what it means to be a Muslim in the modern term here. And so Shaltut and others are basically riding that type of wave. In some aspect, they are Salafi-esque. It depends how you define it, but they are not Salafi in the slightest when it comes to the theology of Salafism, right? The Asma al-Sifat issue, the Qadr issue, the gray, quote unquote, the gray veneration and all of that. That is Ibn Abdul Wahhab. That is, and Al-Albani also flirted with it. Now, I know I can go on and on, I can bore you to death here, but I mean,
no, not at all.
Rashid Ridda, at the end, the last 10 years of his life, we're not going to open his heart here. Inshallah, I actually genuinely admire him and consider him to be sincere. At the same time, you have to earn a living and you have to live a dignified life. And the king of Saudi Arabia did like him and started financing his projects. And that you see a marked sympathy now to Ibn Abdul Wahhab when that begins, right? So, but not an embracing, if that makes sense. Rashid Ridda never became a through and through follower of Ibn Abdul Wahhab. He's not speaking in that language, that rhetoric, tabdi', takfir. But there are laudatory articles about him. There's aspects of the theology of Ibn Abdul Wahhab that he likes. And most importantly, without a doubt, Rashid Ridda was more pro Al Saud than he was pro Sherif of Mecca, right? He viewed the Sherif of Mecca as a complete sellout. Pause here, footnote. Many would agree with him at that time frame. And and I'm just speaking factually. I'm not taking sides right now, even though I have my personal opinions. So he was very sympathetic to Al Saud because he viewed them as being genuine, bona fide representatives of their people, and as not being powers that, as not having been corrupted by the superpowers. Whereas he viewed the Sharif of Mecca as basically, being a pawn, and he wasn't at all pleased with the Sharif of Mecca. So when the Al Saud came, not only theologically is he a little bit more inclined, because he's never through and through, but politically he's super happy. that these guys won rather than what he considered to be Salat. So that's where all of this confusion, comes from. He died in 1935, so he saw the beginning and the end of the rise and the end of the Khilafah, meaning the beginning of the end. Right? He saw the beginning of the end of the Caliphate, and he saw the end of the Caliphate. So he's writing as he sees the decline. He's fighting the colonialist powers. He's really sad something's going to happen, and then it happens as he's alive. And you can sense this pain in his writings. You can sense this genuine shock and awe. And interestingly enough, towards the end of his life, Rashid Ridda actually became a little bit withdrawn, a little bit more personally pietistic and conservative in his views. And again, this reflects like perhaps his own sense of like, there's no, I don't want to say losing hope, but I mean, clearly he finds more comfort than in just, ibadah and dhikr and even his views overall become a little bit more conservative. And so Abdu's version of Salafism is radically different than Rashid Ridda's last version of Salafism, if that makes sense, right?
Makes sense.
And this is an evolution of his ideas. But anyway.
Sheikh, from what's been said so far, any points to discuss? Any contentions?
Yeah, no, there's nothing to it. He's discussing academic work about various ijtihadat or points of view in Islam and conflicting points of view. As a historical study, you can make you remember when discussing some of our shabab about Trump and so on, say what counts for us is 1, 2, 3, 4 points in his relation to the Muslim world and to Islam. That's what counts. The details is relation to the deep state or to the oligarchy and to American first guys and intelligence services. And that's a PhD. You can do a PhD if you want. It's irrelevant for us as people who are carrying da'wah. So this could be a worthy academic study. What does it entail for reviving the Ummah and restarting Islamic civilization, which started declining with Muawiyah and continued? It was like a plateau for some time, then there was a quick decline, then a bit of plateau again, and then complete collapse with the collapse of so-called Khilafah and so on. What to do there, and where is the disease of all these schools of thought and so on, where it goes, where it started and so on. That's our job as Hizb ut-Tahrir Islami. And we think that's, we think we have the solution, which is clearly in the Quran described, which has been forsaken and neglected. So he's doing something which is academically maybe sound. You can make PhDs and master. Actually, the area is very wide. You can make many PhDs there, which is okay, no problem. But the question, how much is that would connect with the genuine Islam? So I'm saying, but there's no genuine Islam. There's genuine Islam, but you have missed it. So with a simple reason that you have forsaken the Quran, put the Quran behind your back. That's when we discuss various movements and what's the meaning of Salafism to start, and other groups and other mutakallimin and so on. Where is the problem started? So what Tajdeed Islam, we are trying is to go to the root of the problem and try to start from zero again. Benefiting from all the developments through time and the various ideas, how they developed, how they connect to certain political plotting of certain rulers, the nifaq of certain rulers and so on, and look at really more for the fundamental, both philosophical and really political analytical way, and not be fooled by the claim that it is, like for example, issues of Qadr and Qadha. We know now by seeing the fabricated hadith, which is mostly emerged by Banu Umaiyah and their cohorts, is to justify that this is all written and decided by the foundation of the world. You accept it, don't accept it, you cannot do anything about it. Instituting essentially some kind of jabr, and then hadith have been fixed and narratives from tabi'een and some even some hadith they attribute to Islam which are manifestly incorrect, even Karib and Bukhari and so on. And if you go to the Quran, you have the solution, but you have to study the Quran from A to Z, every ayah, every place, and synchronize that properly. Leaving the Quran guide you. That's our methodology. If that's it, then many of these questions will settle and it will be clear. And we have also prophetic warning of the other approach that other people, most so-called Islamic scholars and fuqaha and so on have followed from very early time. They just turn their back to the Quran. That's it. And we have in the Quran enough of these things, fundamental things. There will be small issues of rituals and small issues of fiqh. You may need some hadith, but even in that, it turns out Sunnah and even Sunnah Mutawatir is more than enough. And the remaining issues are really minimal. It should have not been developed. The development is because of political plotting, machination, and mischief done by Muawiyah and cohort and others from that time on. And the people who follow them are well engaged inside. Is Muawiyah justified or not? Instead of saying what the Imam, that's the Quran, dictates, and which hadith or tradition of the Prophet is so well established by Tawatur, we stick to that. That's the base. On that solid base, we build. Was never done. Honestly, it was never done. It was entered into partisanship, and then all these branches developed. So this is, okay, someone can study this academically, how that emerged in history and so on, but regarded that this is worthy for Islamic revival or for understanding the Islam, not. Worthy academic work, understanding history, yes, perfectly fine. I have no problem with that.
Okay, understood. And in terms of his observations around the Egyptian movement and Rashid Ridda and Muhammad Abdul, do you have any perspective in terms of their outlook? Because a lot of people, I know from my Hizb ut-Tahrir background, there was a lot of aspersions cast on them in terms of trying to reformation of Islam and so some kind of indications of being nefarious. Do you have any inclination on that?
Not nefarious or not nefarious. Rashid Ridda, for example, Rashid Ridda was very negative towards the Sherif of Mecca. For Sherif Mecca was public in his cooperation with the English and so on. He was vying to establish Arabic Khilafah and so on. And this was the current of the time. The 19th century, there were nationalistic movement, actually nationalism and Turanic movements and young Turks and so on were established first. If we look at history more thoroughly, it is Abdul Majid the first who essentially then finished the Khilafah. The ruling system in Istanbul turned really non-Islamic, turned nationalistic, and the power was in the hand of the young Turks and so on. Since Abdul Majid until the fall of the Khilafah, almost every prime minister, everyone, with the exception of Abdul Hamid has no power. He has a prime minister who is again one of the young Turks and so on, could not turn the tide. Besides, his mentality is a mentality, again, the dark age backward mentality of the Ottoman, not really Islamic mentality, but because his stand towards the Jews and Palestine was good, so he has a good reputation in the Muslim world. But otherwise, he's still deeply stuck in the dark age of the Khilafah Osmaniyya. So that decline and the Turk and the attempt to force Arabic to become the Arab to become Turk, force the Turkish language and the Arab force nationalism, have a counter-reaction by the Arabs. Again, the action and reaction. And the Sharif took the leadership and was the leader, public leader. So he appears, because cooperating obviously with the British and Lawrence of Arabia, etc., as an agent, as a pawn, which it turned out he was not fully, because he and his son Ali rebelled, while the other two sons became completely sellouts. That's Faisal and Abdullah. Abdul Aziz was very secretive, because in Najd, they could not even, first time he went to Riyadh, that's many people do not know that the usual story told by Al Saud in their books and their history, standard one, that he came to Riyadh with 40 or 60 men and took the city by deceit and so on, but is regarded as the city of his grandfathers and Al Saud to re-establish the da'wah and kick out Ibn Ajlan and Rashid, as if Rashid having something against da'wah. Rashid is also a Arabi, like Ibn Saud. And then, but the people do not know that this was not the first campaign. The first campaign was he went with an army of 1,000 something. Some of them are Shia from Kuwait, and few of them are English military people, manifestly blonde and dressed as English. And the people of Riyadh could not tolerate that. They kicked him out. And his mentor and teacher, Mubarak al-Sabah, who is almost surely Murtad and Kafir, told him, did you lose your mind? Your people in Najd will never accept something like that. You have to cover yourself with another cover. If someone in Najd see one of those Rafidah, that's the Shia, it's Ashir Shia, or one of these blondies coming, he will get a scary reaction, almost an anaphylactic shock. You have to cover something. You have to go only with your people from Najd and your slaves. At the time, there were slaves and so on. Only that. Nothing should smell like Shia or British. Nothing. Otherwise, you will never succeed. And that's what Abdul Aziz did. And he learned the lesson. And in the time where the Sherif was announcing publicly that against the Khilafah and he wants the Arab Revolution, establish Arab Khilafah, Abdul Aziz was doing the Qatif Treaty. But that was so secretive, nobody knew about that, which is a sellout, complete sellout. So no wonder that most Muslim scholars at that time, sincere or non-sincere, and we talk about the sincere, the non-sincere we don't count, they are sellouts. But the sincere one, like Muhammad Rashid, they were fooled by Abdul Aziz because they don't see CD, but they are all Darwish. And I know all of these Darwish. My father is one of them. He still believed until the end of his life that Faisal was a great man and so on. Because the people know how to play the game. I mean, the rulers, Faisal and so on. I mean, Faisal bin Abdul Aziz al Saud, not the Faisal of Iraq. No, Abdul Aziz does not need to play anything. He's walking naked. He doesn't care. But Faisal bin Abdul Aziz knows how to dress himself properly with the Islamic garment. So no wonder of that. But that is history. That's history. You can study that. You can analyze it, go in depth. Yes. So that Muhammad Rashid was like that, and at the end of his life, maybe he recognized that he bargained or he made a bid on the wrong horse and felt that something is fishy, something is wrong, maybe, and then just went into isolation and concerned himself with just rituals and so on. That's understandable.
That's also interesting because that's what Abdul Wahab did as well after Abdul Aziz. Ibn Saud kind of sidelined him, so it's quite,
Abdul Aziz Muhammad ibn Saud.
Yeah.
He's actually forced him. Again, I can tell the story there because that's a good occasion. I established good relation in the early 80s. I am very ancient, by the way. So the early 80s was a grown-up man with PhD. He was assistant professor or even associate professor. And somehow conditions worked so that I established a good relation with Abdul Aziz bin Abdullah bin Hassan from Al Sheikh, who used to be a minister of education in the 50s and so on. He has a history, but at that time he was living in his essentially palace mansion, relatively isolated and very negative toward the regime. On Islamic ground, also on power ground. Allah, we don't know what's in the house. But he pretended or appeared to be on Islamic grounds. And then somehow our way crossed and then established here with relation with him. I was visiting him almost every few weeks. And then one day, after establishing a good relation for 1 or 2 years, I told him, Sheikh, your grandfather is also to blame for the misery we have now. Say, how come? Say, how can come that a man, learned man like your grandfather, scholar, leave the affairs to a donkey like Abdul Muhammad? He's a donkey. There are letters written by him, allegedly, addressing the public, say, from Saud, Abdul bin Muhammad bin Saud, to his Muslim brothers, beware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and be pious and so on. These are so-called Shabbat letters distributing around and warning them from graves and disobedience and all of these things. Very nice letters. In Wahhabi spirit, obviously, in Wahhabi language. We know that some people are writing that for him. He's a donkey. He cannot write these things. It's questionable if he was even literate, but maybe he was literate. He could read and write. Let's assume that. That's Abdul Aziz bin Muhammad bin Saud. That's from the first Saudi state in 1770, 80, around that time. And then devote himself to scholarship and rituals, staying home. That was a blunder. Before that, he was essentially like the prime minister. He was the one who organizing the army, the one doing the battle campaigns and so on. That's well known. How could he do such a blunder? He said, who told you that he did that? He said, there's a books in the school. That's what we read in the school. He said, this is all nonsense. They are lying. Say, I know from my father, from his grandfather and so on, that after the conquest of Riyadh, few years, when Abdul Aziz bin Muhammad bin Saud was well established, that's in the first Saudi state, most likely by advice of his father. His father is a man who, in cunningness and shrewdness, almost similar to Muawiyah. Most I told him, my son, this man is obsessed with a certain idea. He moves armies. He seems to be successful. We will benefit him as long as he's successful. until we control Riyadh, because Riyadh is the major city at the time in the area. If we get that one, because they were either 30 years fighting with Riyadh until they controlled it, and controlled it by almost by America, which I mentioned later, if you remind me, not by any fights. If you control that, everything is settled, everything is stable, then you tell him stay home and shut up, because he gave bay'ah to Muhammad bin Saud that the imamah will be Muhammad Saud and his sons. Pure heresy system, which shows Muhammad Wahab is a donkey. He doesn't understand the system of Islam and the meaning of bay'ah. And the mashayikha, the scholarship, will be in Muhammad Wahab and his descendant. So scholarship is now hereditary. That's worse than the Catholic Church. Scholarship is by studying and so on, not joining through the cardinal comment. That's a little bit better than even the Najdi Church. So that's exactly what Muhammad bin Abdul Aziz bin Muhammad bin Saud did. That's my guesswork that his father is one instructor, because all his behavior does not show that cunningness this his father had, or showed almost the level of Muawiyah bin Abi Sufyan in trickery and cunningness and nifaq. When everything settled, he called the Sheikh and told him, listen, you have been managing a state affair and so on. Jazakallah khair, may Allah reward you. Everything is fine. Now it is time for you to retire at home. Obviously, the Sheikh objected, according to Abdul Aziz bin Abdullah bin Hassan, telling me face to face. But Abdul Aziz bin Hassan, remember, you gave bay'ah to my father that the Imam will be him and then his descendant. Are you breaking the bay'ah so we can tell the people about that? And then Muhammad bin Abdul Wahab was cornered. So he sat home and just was done doing rituals and doing education classes. No more government activity. So that's what happened. He did not go there by his own design. No, I did not. He was forced to. And he has to blame himself for that. So that's again a clarification at the side. Occasionally, how they control Riyadh. Actually, in Riyadh, there was a man called Daham bin Dawas. He seemed to be possibly from a slave background, but a man really filling his shoes, as a real fighter. And they was fighting on and off, and sometimes he adopted Wahhabism and made peace with them. Sometimes he rejected Wahhabism, and their literature say he became murtad and fought them, and then back and forth. And then one dark day, nobody knows what was the motivation. It seems to be the man gave up. He said, there's 30 years I'm fighting without even succeeding to get rid of these people. Dar'iyah is just only 20 kilometers from Riyadh. Riyadh was very small at the time. Now Dar'iyah is part of Riyadh. It's actually a sub-council of Riyadh, opposite to King Saud University, the new campus, which was established in the 80s, which will most likely stay as a campus for maybe a century because it's huge. And then suddenly nobody knows what happened to the man. He lost it. He took his family and some of his soldiers, and so he was a devotee, and just left Riyadh and went towards south, toward Kharj. He never reached Kharj, and nobody knows what has happened to them. Most likely they came in a sandstorm and they buried, and nobody found them until now, until today. They are gone, traceless in history. And then the city has no leadership, and there are many Wahhabis there and many anti-Wahhabis. Ultimately, the Wahhabis took over and invited Muhammad bin Wahab and Abdul Aziz bin Muhammad bin Saud to come and take over. That's the miracle which has happened. They did not succeed in defeating Dahab in the West. He just decided to cut his lost shot and moves and go away, and then disappears from history. He never arrived at Kharj. Kharj is about 80 kilometers south of Riyadh, and arrived nowhere. Nobody knows where they're gone. Most likely, as I said, the sandstorm took them over and they are buried somewhere. Obviously, they have disintegrated now. Maybe one day we'll find a bunch of bones and turns out to be the Dahab bin Dawas and his family and small army, which has left Riyadh, maybe. But Allah, nobody is digging for that anyway. It's not an important archaeological find anyway. So that's it. So that's what happened. So most Mashayikh of the Muslims, even the sincere one, they are Darwish. They're simple-minded. The rulers, if they play the game correctly, they can't take them for a ride. Including a generation up to my father's generation and many of my generation. They still believe these rulers are ultimately sincere and they're under international pressure and they have to play the game. That's not true. Most of these rulers currently are sell-out, blatant traitors. And some of them are showing their face now openly, like those of the Emirates. And the other are not showing it. They are more cunning because they are smaller or don't have the facility like the one of of Qatar and Saudi Arabia, they have shown their face, but not fully like the one in Emirates, not so blatantly. They have to hedge their bets a little bit because they have the two holy mosques and so on, so they have to be more cautious. But the Emirates, they don't care because the family is ruling there. There are about 7 Emirates there. They are known since centuries that they were living from illegitimate taxes for those who are fishing for pearls and running prostitution brothels. That's their income. It's hundreds of years. That's known. So these people are just shameless. They don't care about how they present themselves to the public. They're known to be brother keeper and so on. Oh, there's not very much to hedge there. They don't have that to haramin. They don't have any history of pro-Islamic action or anything. No, they are sellouts since hundreds of years. Except one family, the Qawasma. These are the one who became Wahhabi. And before becoming Wahhabi, they were fighting the British. And after becoming Wahhabi, they were fighting British until Abdul Wahhab himself and Abdul Muhammad Saud invited their leader in Riyadh and locked him away and made a deal with the British. That's all he did in the first Saudi state. But we don't want to go to his painful history. That's his history. That's rulers and munafiq playing games with the simple-minded, stupid mashayikh and playing and misleading the general public, including mashayikh.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting about the video is you're going to start going into the demarcation between the various types. There'll be points at which to interject, inshallah.
I can go on and on, but that's not where you're having me on.
No, not at all. This is really interesting, and this will probably take the bulk of what we want to talk about. We're going to talk about sectarianism and fanaticism, and for those that are listening, we're going to touch at the end on the epic, the latest news in Texas and Dallas, and one of the more famous masajid in the United States, and a type of flagship or
I'll skip ahead.
And we're all our idea. There are certain basic ideas to it. Salafiyya, the idea. So
you're going to now talk about Salafiyya, the idea. That should be a point at which we can
certain basic ideas to it. I want to ask you about if you list those ideas for us.
Yes.
But also, I want to ask you another question on top of them. I'm asking you 2 in 1, which is that when you have an idea that's so broad, and everyone can make their own version of it, at some point, it becomes almost too broad to even say the word. For example, in the Western sphere, feminism, generally it's a concern for women. There's like 50 types of feminism, right? Whereas if we talk about a madhab, for example, let's say the Hanafi madhab, now it starts with a person, that person has disciples, has students. You can actually I can say the dominant opinion in the Hanafi school is XYZ, and here are the books that all the Hanafi people, scholars agree with. Whereas you can't do that with a movement, per se. You can't do that with a lady.
Yeah, I mean, I agree and disagree. I mean, again, la mushahid bil-istilah, it really goes back to your own, how you want to demarcate. So if you wish to demarcate Salafism as a trend of theology, and again, that's up for grabs because Allah did not reveal these terms. Frankly, neither did Allah reveal the term Hanafism or Sunnism or whatnot. So if you want to be super academic, which I don't mind at all, confuse some of the guys out there, even Sunnism has been contested from day one, man. I mean, what are you talking about? It's still contested to this day. You know, look at the group, and again, being academic, I'm not trying to be incendiary in the talk. This is a, ilmi talk here. You know, the Barelvi movement, Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they call themselves, right? And they make takfir of the Deobandis, right? And the Deobandis don't really like the Wahhabis, and everybody's. So, I mean, if you really want to get down to it, Fadilat al-Shaykh, in reality, the same can be said of any trend out there. It's not as simplistic as saying, Sunnism is defined. No, it's not defined. Who's going to define it? We don't have an ecclesiastically elected body that is unanimously agreed upon that is going to, delineate and demarcate. It is what it is. Same goes for Salafism. Salafis are extremely divided amongst themselves, like pretty much any movement is. All human movements are divided. Even Hanafis, the Ottoman Hanafis are very different than the modern Deobandis, and the South Africans are, Allah bless all of us to be kind and gentle to each other. You get my point here. So if you define Salafism as a set of theological ideas, then you can trace proto-Salafism, you can trace it to before Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and through Ahmad ibn Hanbal, and then through the early Hanabila, all the way to Ibn Taymiyyah, all the way to Ibn Abdul Wahhab, all the way to our times, where overall the hallmarks of this movement have been to reject kalam in its Sunni and non-Sunni manifestations, because kalam has Mu'tazili manifestations, and it has obviously Sunnah. It has been Sunniyatized, via Ibn Kullab, and then of course Al-Ash'ari al-Maturidi. So there's Sunni versions of kalam, and then there's non-Sunni versions of kalam. So if you wish to, demarcate a trend of non-kalam Sunnism, this is what I would call recognizable, Atheism or Salafism of our times. And again, call it whatever you will. There is a trend from the very beginning of time that did not like the science of kalam, and they viewed the attributes in a different manner than those who subscribed to kalam did. To me, this trend, it's a historical fact. It has existed from the earliest documented works that we have, right? And it lasts up until our times. This is what I studied in chapter 2 of my book, and I called it basically, Salafism. If you want to contest and say, no, you should not call it Salafism, okay, no problem. Call it something else. But it is a trend that is recognizable and that is historically continuous, but it is not causally linked. So like all trends, it develops, it has different iterations, it has differences within, the Hanbalism, call it Atheism, Salafism of Ibn Aqil, and then his student Ibn al-Jawzi is different than that of Ibn Taymiyyah, which is different than that of Ibn Qudama. They're all on a spectrum, right? But they all are within a trend. They're not kalam, pro-kalam, right? So that's what and it goes back to even before Ahmad ibn Hanbal. You clearly have people that were not influenced by Ibn Hanbal, Ad-Darimi, and his Ar-Rad ala Jahmiyyah and Rad ala Bishr al-Marisi. And you have Ibn Qutayba, who is an intellectual. He's definitely not your simple-minded, stereotypical Hanbali. Ibn Qutayba ad-Daynawari, a very erudite, belles lettres, person, well-read. And in Sifat, he clearly is, what you would call Hanbali, even though he's not Hanbali madhaban, right? And others as well. There's plenty of evidence. I mean, Salafis would even argue, and that's contested. Salafis would even argue this is the methodology of Imam Malik and Imam al-Shafi'i. Not just, you know this about them, right? That's what they view. From their perspective, Malik did not like kalam. He rejected kalam, right? And in his view, that the attribute should just be affirmed bila kayf. And I don't want to get into the details. I know Ash'arism and Maturidism have their interpretations of what Imam Malik said. All I'm saying for the record, the Salafis have their interpretation. They also claim Imam Malik amongst their ranks, right? Mm-hmm. So that's my point. Anyway, we can go on and on, but I know that's not why I'm here.
So that's the number one trend in terms of theology, which is the
yes,
the rejection of kalam. That's fair enough. That's clear throughout all the type.
Yes, sir.
I don't. That may be what appears. The rejection of kalam became clear and more like a cover. And there was no real kalam and conflict with kalam, except maybe in the late 2nd century. Before that, it was not formulated that. It is actually, if we want to say about Salaf, it's actually it was the main split, beside obviously the Khawarij, and the issue of Khawarij we can discuss separately, and the emergence of the people called Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah. Jama'ah meaning the people who give bay'ah to Muawiyah. That's it. Let's face it. We are the Jama'ah. Everything is outside. That's how Muawiyah tuned it and how he formulated it. And his follower, either sellouts or the people who are fed up with bloodshed, possibly sincerely, who did not see the implication of what they did. One of them is, for example, Hassan, when he surrendered the Khilafah to Muawiyah, Al-Hassan ibn Ali, which is a catastrophic point for the Shia to admit, because it undermines the theory of the Imam. But that's not our point at the moment. From that on, this line developed and also supported with some fabrication from the side of Muawiyah and his cohort. These fabrication of ahadith were mostly directed towards demonizing anyone who is against Muawiyah, because this means one of its aspects, because they play the game very skillfully. He is trying to split the Jama'ah and reintroduce the bloodshed. That's number one. Secondly, the bloodshed before that, although Muawiyah may be most likely the mistaken one, but he was mujtahid. Yeah, he's not a munafiq kafir, he's just a mujtahid. And thirdly, demonizing women, because Aisha was in the battle campaign, and that's condemned allegedly by the Prophet, that he said any people who take a woman as their leader, they will be doomed, and something like that, which is a fabricated hadith, which you find in Bukhari, by the way. The issue is very deep from that generation of Muawiyah, and even before he took power. The fabrication he started with the hadith of the fitna is like Sayasi al-Baqar, which is fabricated by him and his guys. They did the fabrication, but he fabricated other hadith directly when he was forced, but rarely he is forced. Usually he plotted things at night and the other do the job, and he's just witnessing and pretending to be innocent. From that, and then they have to invent the issue of Qadr. That has been written since the foundation of the world. Nothing can be done. Allah knows the future, etc. They connected to the knowledge. Otherwise, you are a kafir. You deny Allah's knowledge. Allah bi kulli shay'in alim, including the future and so on. That game was there. And in all of that, the Quran has been forsaken and chucked in the back. And then later on, a corrective movement started by so-called Mu'tazila, when there was a discussion between Wasl ibn Ata and possibly Amr ibn Ubayd in the halaq of Hassan al-Basri. And after that, so he separated to the side. And then we have these people then developing things more over rational ground, in addition to going more to the Quran, by the way. Mu'tazila going more to the Quran, but they did not go in full to the Quran. And then they have the issue of, then they have other usul, including al-ma'ruf and al-munkar, the commanding good and forbidding evil, accounting the ruler is fundamental, shall not be forsaken. And then also the issues, and that's the reason the Salafi and people Sunnah say this, making that an asl of deen is essentially opening the door for khuruj and fighting the rulers. For them, you don't fight the rulers, unless an extreme case of kufr, and they put so many conditions that ultimately, in the later phase, a very later phase, some Hanbali scholar said, even if the ruler becomes a kafir, you don't rebel against him, even to that extreme it went. So that's the line of scum. So I don't think this is anti-kalam. Anti-kalam is a later cover, is a quote which works nice for the common Muslims and the simple-minded hadith reporter and so on, who are themselves not qualified to be faqih or thinker. Because ilm al-kalam is essentially thinking about the various issues of qadr, divine attributes, and so on. But it was started by this. So even that, I think his tashkhis, his diagnosis of the problem does not go deep enough, and he doesn't say where the problem is at. And the deepest diagnosis of that is that the Quran has been forsaken. And the warning of the Quran, which is clearly in various places, for example, when the Quran says about the people, the Christians say, from those who said we are Nasara, Nazarin, that's the name they used in Arabic, and that's the name originally used by the people around Isa in Palestine, in the Holy Land. The term Christian was used maybe later in the 2nd century. From those who said we are Nazarin, we took their covenant. Isa took the covenant with them. The covenant is that comply with the scripture, etc. فَنَسُوا حَظًّا مِمَّا ذُكِّرُوا, they've forgotten or they've forsaken, depending upon forgotten or forsaken, some of that what they have been ordered to carry and understand and propagate. What was the result of forgetting or forsaking? Most likely here for nasu, meaning for the forsaken. They just neglected. They regarded as less important, and this way it came out of the vision field. Especially Paul neglected most important things there, with the result that the current Christianity is actually Paulinity, is not the Christianity of Isa. But in the middle of these details, what is the result the Quran says? The result of doing that? فأغرينا بينهم العداوة والبغضاء إلى يوم القيامة وسوف ينبئهم الله بما كانوا يعملون وما كانوا فيه يختلفون. I don't remember the ending of the ayah. So the moment you forsake some of that, what you have been ordered to keep and remember and apply, enmity and split will be between you. In the case of Nazarene, that what has been forsaken is lost forever. The only way they can gain it back is that they cease to be Nazarene and Christian and become Muslims. They didn't become. So the remaining one will be in split and confusion and fight against Ajab and hatred until Yawm al-Qiyamah. There's no way. Because all that what has been revealed, if it's taken all of it, it will bring a reasonable base, and the dispute will be secondary issues which people can matter of ijtihad, and it will never come to the hot issues which lead to hostility and war. But if you take substantial things, part of the covenant, you will never recover. In the case of Muslims, they did that, but luckily we have the protected dhikr, the Quran. We can recover. That's the point. We can recover.
Sheikh, I wanted to ask a question. So Sheikh Yasir mentioned kind of the focus he put on understanding the Salafism and the spectrum of Salafism being the anti-kalam element to it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for the modern day Muslim who's been exposed to Salafism, their first kind of introduction to it is the idea that we follow Islam from the Quran, Sunnah, and from the way of the Salaf. From the
That's the Quran, Sunnah, yes, that's just theoretical way of Salaf. What is Salaf? The question we had direct to them, which Salaf you mean?
Yeah, exactly. Now, my question I wanted to ask is, because Sheikh Yasir didn't really touch upon it, is he tried to bring examples from history showing that it came from Ahmad bin Hanbal and before him from a couple of people, this idea always existed.
So it's
Is
not the
that
Salaf
true?
they define. If you ask them what is the Salaf, they say Sahaba. Say, but the Sahaba disagreement about very important points.
Yeah.
So they say Ijma' Sahaba. Okay, but the Tabi'in have disagreement. So Ijma' Tabi'in and so on. And ultimately, if you have this Ijma' of the three generations, they claim the blessed generation, if you have real Ijma', it is Quran and Sunnah. You don't need that, because that Ijma' can only be things which are so fundamentally clear and obvious in Quran and Sunnah. You don't need that Salaf. But what they mean is certain people they chose and declared to be the Salaf. That's it. Which is Ahmad bin Hanbal and few people before him. That's not Salaf.
So where would you say, Sheikh, in that did this idea really become popularized as much as it is? Because now in some Muslims' minds, it's like a given. It's like an automatic assumption that this idea has always existed, which you're saying is not the case.
No, it's not the case. Definitely not the case. Ask them, who is your Salaf?
Yeah.
They have to answer. They will tell the Sahaba, but the Sahaba have dispute, have various points of view.
Would you agree that the roots of this idea come from Ahmad bin Hanbal? Would you say, Sheikh?
Which idea?
That our Islam, the way we follow it, kind of lives and dies and stops with the Sahaba's understanding, with the Salaf's understanding. That because you know very well in Ahmad bin Hanbal's madhab, it's very much focused on if the Sahaba or the Tabi'een or the Tabi'een did something, we stop there.
No. Only Sahaba. I would say this is the wrong report in Madhab Hanbal. If there's an issue and he has some report from Sahaba, he takes that. He say that ijtihad is superior to mine. He did not say even it is wahy or something. I will stop. I will take that. If there are various options, he chooses from them. But you could say that started Abu Hanifa. Abu Hanifa said the same. If there is some reports about a certain fiqh issue from the Sahaba, one or more Sahabi, then he chooses between them and he doesn't go out of them. Like there's 2 points of view, for example, coming from there, then he does not allow himself to go outside these 2 points of view. Takes either A or B. He does not allow himself to go out. After that, Tabi'in say they are men and we are men. I can choose and I can go out. Why he thought that he cannot go out of the Sahaba, what happened in his mind, we don't know. Most likely some kind of argument that they were receiving the revelation, they understood Quran and Sunnah better, they are Arabic speaker, but none of these arguments is really a Burhani argument. But it actually contradicts the Quran in some sense, but again, the Quran has been forsaken. They rely on their mashayikh. Abu Hanifa, despite he is going to the Quran partly, he relies on what he heard from his shuyukh. His shuyukh, some of them, he did not have shuyukh from Sahaba. Maybe he has seen Anas ibn Malik as a child, but that's it. So his shuyukh are some medium and great tabi'in. That's fine, no problem. And these took from Sahaba. That's the shuyukh. And usually they report what they mashayikh they said. So like anyone in a scholarship area, Nobody of these dared, or it was not a custom at that time to go directly to Quran and deduce. The people did not have enough self-trust, and they, by also the game of Banu Umaiyah, they were fooled and taken around to this, because this is the only way Banu Umayyah could enforce their power. For example, they invented so many stories about Uthman, gave him so many virtues that they said he was killed unjustifiably. Although Muawiyah was almost certainly the one who killed him unjustifiably and put that in Ali's quarter. But we know that from the various studies we are now completing. But in a minute, who killed him or not? And anything we can attribute to Uthman, we can rely on an authority because he's a Khalifa Rashid. So we follow Uthman. If there's disagreement between Khalifa Rashidin, an inheritance issue or something like that, there are a few disagreements, they follow Uthman. Al-Khalifa al-Madlum, the unjustly treated Khalifa. Yeah? So it is a very complicated, it's a political play, played intelligently by Muawiyah and his cohort, Ziyad and so on, and few fabricated hadith, 5, 10, 15, were enough to see the destiny of the matter. And the one coming after that, they never dared going back and starting scrutinizing. They got stuck in this confrontation, which is partly political, partly ideological, and never went back. So the job is to go back and forget all of that and brush over it. Yeah, we discussed what they have and their justification, if they have any justification, and they quoted the weaknesses in these points of view. You see my point?
Yeah.
So, study the history, even if it's deficient, like what Yasir Qadi said about that it goes to anti-kalam. I think this is the way Ibn Taymiyyah has to present it. Presenting in such a way is Ibn Taymiyyah's trick, while he himself is a mutakallim, even an extreme mutakallim. So he's indulging in philosophy and sophistry to an extreme. He does kalam worse than mutakallimin. I mean, worse, but deeper in kalam. Wrong or right, that's another issue to be analyzed objectively by every issue.
Can you give us an example?
Hmm?
Can you give us an example of him being an extreme mutakallim?
Oh, yeah, just read his books about the attributes and so on, and the issue of space and time and infinite regress, etc. Even a complete book about المنطق. الرد على المنطقيين, respond to the منطقيين.
It's not a negative.
Not even mutakallim, he's more even philosopher almost.
Which isn't a negative trait. It's not obviously not something you can use to
but he claims that this is kalam, this is the claim of the mutakallimin, to use it to burn the others to negative, while he is a mutakallim. This is sophistry, while he is the most sophisticated sophist in Islamic history. Who can twist matters.
That's the contradiction of it all.
Yeah,
they're not consistent about it, that they will demonize everyone who goes anywhere near
because you cannot be consistent if you have forsaken the Quran.
Yeah.
Throw it behind you. You will never be consistent. Like that, we from those who said we are not Syrian, we took their covenant. فَنَسُوا حَظًّا مِمَّا ذُكِّرُوا. They've more forsaken or forgotten or left part of that what they have been instructed to study and memorize and keep. What's the result? فَأَغْرَيْنَا بَيْنَهُمُ الْعَدَاوَةَ وَالْبَغْضَاءَ. Then we instigated hatred and enmity between them until the day of judgment. Because that what they have forsaken is lost forever. Unless they come to Muhammad sallallahu, then they are no more Nazarene. They are then Muslims. Or they are the genuine Nazarene, but they don't have the name of Nazarene anymore. They have to carry the new name or the old name Muslim, which Ibrahim is started. Which the one who should be carried by a Muslim, they should not have resisted. If someone asks you, are you Sunni or Shia? Say, no, I am Muslim, Hanif, nothing else. Go, get out of my way with the rubbish. I don't recognize these rubbish names. Dump them in the rubbish. But nobody dares that. Now we are daring to do that. I'm getting the Ummah there, inshallah. But we have we are lucky that we have a protected dhikr, the Quran. And the totality of the Sunnah as such is protected. And the fundamental issues are settled by the Quran itself and some hadith mutawatir. We don't need even a hadith mutawatir for all fundamental issues. We may need them for some historical issues and so on, which are of secondary importance anyway. Honestly, you don't need them.
I mean, it would reinforce and clarify a lot of things, no doubt, I imagine.
Yeah. So I think even this diagnosis that in theology term, it is anti-kalam, no. It is that's especially the way represented by Ibn Taymiyyah. And that Qutayba al-Daynuri and Ahmed bin Hamza were anti-kalam because at that time they were arguing with the Mu'tazila, and the Mu'tazila were using rational tools, logical tools, and they didn't know how to deal with that. They say, bring us from the Quran and Sunnah. And the other side is not skilled in that, unfortunately. They do not go to Quran and Sunnah deeply enough, and they thought maybe they thought there's nothing there. And the result that the debate was essentially suspended or tilted slightly to the favor of Muhaddithin by saying, for example, the issue of Khalq Al Quran. When the Mu'tazila were when Ahmed al-Hanbal, first the mistake was that the Mu'tazila used the state to enforce their point of view. This is a blunder. The moment you do that, you put yourself in the corner. That's number one. It's done also by the Christian time past and ended also in blunder. That's number one. But leave that. This is the spirit of the time. It was like that. And this is, again, not following the Quran and Sunnah and reading it carefully. Okay? So that's number one. Secondly, when the issue of Khalq Al Quran, he said, bring me something of Quran and Sunnah. Is it makhluk or makhluk? He is holding the judgment. Later on, he said, no, it's not makhluk, based on certain obscure reasons. If the Mu'tazila would go back to the Quran, you remember when we came to the ayah, if they said that, he would have stuck. He could not have done anything. And the whole history would not have taken another direction. And he cannot deny that the Quran is dhikr by necessity, which dhikr may be wider than the Quran, but definitely the Quran is dhikr, with certitude of the Quran. Nobody denies the Quran is dhikr. And it's muhdath, nobody doubt about that. And it comes bit by bit and portion, but nobody can doubt. It's historic consistency and the Quranic consistency.
Can you expand on what you mean by muhdas?
Created. Being after non-being. That's it. Hadath, event, is not eternal, non-eternal.
But Sheikh, this is what Sheikh Yasir was saying as well, that the bigger problem with this whole concept and this topic is that it's making a subject that's not necessary for a Muslim to be fixated on and making it part of creed. You know, Sheikh Yasir said that.
We'll come to that. That's how to criticize it in depth. But the historic development, it doesn't go really much deeper than Ahmed bin Hanbal and maybe a generation before. Malik also because he's ignorant. For example, his sheikh, Rabi' ibn Abdul Rahman, he asked about istiwa. Rabi' ibn answered the following way. الاستواء معلوم from language. والكيف غير معقول. The nature of this istiwa is not conceivable. He means it cannot be imagined. That's غير معقول, not that is irrational. No, it's not conceivable. وعلى رسول البلاغ, and the messenger has to tell us, and he told us there is istiwa. وعلينا الإيمان. I did not add anymore. He did not talk about bid'ah or sunnah. Malik, his student, blundered. He said الاستواء مجهول والاستواء معلوم والكيف مجهول, which is wrong. It's not majhul. It's known for language, and we know what is it. But how to visualize it in our mind, assuming there's something istiwa really, is not a metaphor for running the kingdom, like the more appropriate way of going. But independent of that, والإيمان به واجب, okay, no problem, because in the Quran. والسؤال عنه بدعة. This is بدعة. This is what Malik blundered. This is Malik blundered. How come the السؤال عنه بدعة? Who gave you authority to claim السؤال عنه بدعة? السؤال عن الكيف. Who said that? You can't ask كيف many aspects of the divine being. أفلم يسيروا في الأرض فانظروا كيف بدأ الخلق. You can ask كيف in certain things. So why asking about the كيف? وسؤال عن meaning what كيف? Not about is there is istiwa or not. No doubt about that. So there is istiwa mentioned in the Quran, but the كيف. Malik with his fantasy and deficient fiqh and intelligence, unfortunately, I know very Maliki will be upset to hear that, but his deficiency in fiqh and even in rationality is clear. It's clear even in his racism. Look in the madhab. There's some racists that you wonder that this madhab is spreading in Africa. They should have left that madhab long ago.
Sheikh, do you have any examples of the deficiency in his fiqh? Just for the
Yeah, the example. Let's say, for example, he say it's okay for the black one and the ugly one not to cover her face, but for the white one and the beautiful one, she has to cover her face. Black one. So black one is automatically ugly for him. Racism. And many other things like that. السوداء والشوهاء. The black and the ugly, they don't need to cover their face. Besides, covering the face is also a little obligation anyway. So it's showing how poor this man in understanding our fiqh. Another example also, this is concerning racism, but other example, someone coming, they regard that as a virtue of Malik, that he's cautious and he doesn't give fatwa, he doesn't know. Someone came from Andalus with 40 questions. And the result that Malik said, I don't know for all of them except 3. And the man asked him, should I go back to Andalus? Tell him, Malik said, for 37, he doesn't know. Say, tell him that he doesn't know. At least this show that he is not daring to lie. But most likely, even if he lied, he would not be able to say anything. So the best thing is to say, Adri, then he is safe at least. He shows safety. It's not a matter of humility, I think. Allah Alam, we are not going to classify the people in what is in their heart.
It's quite interesting, Sheikh, because it's quite counter to the narrative that they teach you from the Sunni side, that Malik was unique almost because he was someone who mastered hadith and he was also someone who did ra'i in his fiqh as well.
It's not true. Concerning hadith, understanding hadith analysis, Abu Hanifa is superior to him. And also his attack against Abu Hanifa, if these stories are valid, I think most of them are valid. When we don't see that the point of view of Abu Hanifa, because Abu Hanifa was a man of ra'i, of analysis, and they call it ra'i, because they regard following the hadith slavishly is the correct way, which is not correct. But anyway, Abu Hanifa has ra'i and balances various hadith and so on. Although he has his own blunders or his own ra'i, but he was doing that. And his halaqah contained muhaddithin, contained logician, contained mutakallimin, and all things were discussed thoroughly. And he asked the people around him what they think, until the point of view is crystallizing out, and not the way Malik does. And one was asked, why is the Ra'i Abu Hanifa does not come to Medina? We don't see the Hanafi madhab spreading in Medina. What did he say? على أنقابها Medina, on the entries of Medina, there are angels protecting it from Dajjal, meaning that the Ra'i Abu Hanifa is somehow related to the Masih al-Dajjal. Very, very nasty point of view about other people. Classifying people as weak because he disagrees with their point of view. Many things. We don't want to go in personal analysis and personal, but if necessary, we do it. If someone becomes stubborn and try to come with these nonsensical things, we will have to slap his face first. If he doesn't wake up, we'll crush his head if necessary, unfortunately. So that's the problem. I think this is regarding as only a issue of kalam or theology. That's not how it is. The word Salafi was used, started to use in the 5th century. Abu Tahir al-Salafi, one of the hadith scholars, he called himself Salafi, meaning he's concerned with the reports from the Salaf. He's specialized in hadith, in reports from Sahaba and Tabi'een. That's his specialty. So Salafi meaning the one who is studying statement of Salaf, their traditions, their reports, is a man of hadith, but widening it a little bit, including what's reports from fatwa of Sahaba and things like that. I think Abu Tahir al-Salafi is the first one who used the term Salafi in that sense, not a matter of issue of Aqidah and so on. Not in that manner. Even Qutayb al-Dainuri and others did not use the word Salafi at that time. And if it's used for generation around that, they use against Shia. See, they insult the Salaf. Or they talk about Salaf, meaning that some of the Shia are attacking usually, for example, the usual attack was at the time, mostly, although some of them, this the extreme one, were attacking Abu Bakr and Umar. But the generality was attacking the general Shia, including Zaydi. The most Shia at the time were Zaydi. They were not Ithna Ashri yet, because Ithna Ashri was not developed yet. It developed much later. They were essentially Zaydi. They were attacking whom? Attacking essentially Muawiyah, and attacking Hajjaj and so on. And these one, when, for example, someone who is from Thaqif and things like that, they will say they're attacking the Salaf. our previous generation, meaning attacking our grandfathers and so on, Hajjaj and Muawiyah, things like that. That's what they mean of Salaf. The whole thing is a messed up. Even these terms are messed up. Even if you ask what's the meaning of Rafidi, where does it come? They tell you a story about that the Shia of Kufa went to Zayd ibn Ali and they asked him for support. They said, we're supporting only if you denounce Abu Bakr and Umar. Say, A'udhu Billah. I denounce who denounced them. And they rejected him, say, no, we will not support you. And they say, Rafatuni. Most likely is an imaginary story, because I found the narration that Salim ibn Abi Ja'd and another older Tabi'i were in Sham, because they were frequently in Sham for their business. They were old people at the time. The time of Abdul Malik, Salim ibn Abi Ja'd was close to 100 years. And the other Tabi'i was also an aged Tabi'i. The other Tabi'i is one of the main narrators for Umar, so he must be quite old, aged, in the year 89, 90, something like that. And then the narration says, both of them have been lashed, I think, 100 lashes, ala taraffud, because of taraffud. What is the meaning of taraffud? The narration doesn't say. I think because they are rejecting Muawiyah and the authority of Banu Umayyah and Bani Marwan. That's most likely being the taraffud. Otherwise, what the meaning of taraffud? So taraffud is a more older word than Zayd ibn Ali, because Zayd ibn Ali rebellion was in 120 plus. And we're talking about something in the year 88. Yeah, it must be 87 at least, because 86, the criminal Abdul Majid died and Al-Walid came. And these were two guys, two first-class hadith narrator, known for piety and exactness. They were flogged by Al-Walid ibn Abdul Malik in his reign for taraffud. It's a very painful history, but that's, if someone wants to study history, he has to dig a little bit deeper and find where these terms started and how much cover up and playing games with the people. Plenty of filth there and so on, which has been covered up. And only some narration just leaked and gave us some vision. For example, the following narration, someone was discussing with Isa ibn Yunus, ibn Abi Ishaq, Isa ibn Yunus al-Kufi, because there are two guys with the name Isa ibn Yunus. Isa ibn Yunus al-Fakhuri al-Ramli, a Palestinian, and Isa ibn Yunus, who is a Kufi. His grandfather is Abu Ishaq al-Sabi'i. And Isa ibn Yunus is an authority really in hadith and in deen and fadl. And he was working in Thagr, in one of the ports towards the Roman, as a judge. And then someone was chatting with him. And he said, we regard Awza'i as virtuous and as well-standing as Sufyan al-Thawri. Sufyan was really the prime example of piety and hostility to the rulers, not taking any jobs with them and so on. And Isa ibn Yunus said, no, Awza'i does not reach the rank of Sufyan al-Thawri. No way it can. And then the man repeated, and Isa ibn Yunus said, then let me tell you what, so and so on reported to me that he heard Al-Awza'i himself saying, I could not take my salary from the treasury until I denounced Ali ibn Abi Talib, and I testified that all my wives are divorced, the current one and the future, and all my slaves are free if I deviate from that. Then say after that, I was in such a state of shock that I made such a mistake that Awza'i admitting, at least this is plus on his side, that I could not do anything except I asked them, people say, you are under duress, you don't need to divorce or liberate. Say, but I was cautious, he liberated all his slaves and divorced his wife and remarried them again to get out of this goddamn oath. And then the issue is that how people were treated by Bani Umayyah, by the Bani Marwan. For us, the issue. For Isa ibn Yunus was the issue that Awza'i could never be the same rank like Sufyan al-Thawri, who never received any salary from the government. He said, would Sufyan have done something like that? There's a lot of filth you have to dig out. But anyway, that's not an issue today. It's, even academically, you cannot really say it is the issue of kalam, the main one. I don't think so. It's just the muhaddithin who are devoted to hadith completely and who are not known to be having any good background with the Quran tafsir and didn't bother about Quran or study it thoroughly. And they regarded everything as hadith and what's narrated from Sahaba and Tabi'een, and they collected that and so on. Until someone like Abu Tahir al-Salafi called himself Salafi because this is his working field. Not any issues with as far as I remember, not issue related to issue of kalam or not kalam. If someone asks him, what is your work, what you are doing, Masri, I'm collecting a hadith and report about Sahaba and Tabi'een. Don't bother me with anything. That's my specialty. Yeah, that's my specialty area. Okay, so that's so what else?
Yeah, he's going to continue. So another thing he differentiates is about their stance towards madhabs. I mean, there's plenty more to get through because there is some interesting stuff there.